Hello and welcome back to Stumbling Through Security, Episode 7, with your host, Sean Goodwin. A reminder that show notes can be found at seangoodwin.blog/STS007. Just a few things to talk about tonight. The first one being an upcoming speaking engagement at Wild West Hackin' Fest, Way West. So Wild West Hacking Fest, put on by the folks at Black Hills Information Security. They're actually having a second event. So the original one is in South Dakota. And what was really interesting, as I've mentioned before, is that the conference got a lot of attention. They had a lot of really great speakers and sessions, and so popularity really started to grow. And rather than grow the event itself, they decided to just have a second location and keep the attendance numbers smaller, which is really great because you get to actually meet all the people putting out this great information and have a lot of beneficial conversations with them. And so I am lucky enough to be selected to give a fire talk, so a 15-minute talk. I'll be out there, my talk Thursday, March 12th at 5:25 p.m. And I'm actually really excited about this one because the talk I had submitted focuses on the human side of security. So the title being Overcoming Layer 8 Control Failures, Engaging Your Staff in the Fight Against Cyber Criminals. And what I really like about this is just the study of human psychology and decision making, and how you can start to use that for good. I always struggle with how much we in security should rely on folks in other departments as part of the security program. There's some folks that expect everyone in the company to be security experts and report every phish and everything suspicious, but the other side of the argument is the finance department doesn't call people in to help closing the books each quarter or each year. Maybe they ask you to get your time done, time entries done by a certain time, or expense entries done by a certain time to make their job easier, but they're not asking you to actually do their job. And I think part of that mentality can transfer over to the security department as well, where we shouldn't be expecting folks to do our job as far as security, but there are some things that I think are reasonable to ask folks outside of security to do, or things not to do, just to make the security job easier. So then I started looking into, what other things can we do, either as part of training or just general process that can help contribute to that effort. So that's really what I'm talking about. 15 minutes is pretty quick. So I think that'll have to stay, a little bit higher level, but I'm hoping to really get into 2 or 3, actionable items for folks, and really looking forward to talking more about that afterwards. Taking a look at some of the other talks, there's an incredible speaker lineup for a pretty quick session. I think one of the things that will be pretty interesting is so they do have two talk tracks that are going. One of the items I'm really looking forward to is actually on Friday afternoon. Quick start guide to the MITRE ATT&CK, the do's and don'ts when using the matrix. This is something I've been starting to pay more attention to, and I think a lot of folks have as well, with all the work MITRE's been putting into it. But I think it'll be nice to show some more real world use cases, especially as Caldera picks up popularity, and now there's TRAM for actually trying to automate the reporting process, or automate the process of connecting any report findings to the attack matrix. So it'll be nice to see what the folks at Scythe, who's actually putting on the talk, what they're seeing as really successful uses, and certain things, they've seen not go as well. I think I plugged it last time, but it's worth mentioning again. The Advanced Cubicles and Compromises workshop, I think, is definitely worth checking out. That's something I was able to participate in the last Wild West Hacking Fest, and really thought it was a great time. The tool shed, it was nice to see that that actually is coming back again. And this is a chance for any folks to present their open source tools or new projects they've been working on, try and get some feedback, hopefully get some other folks to contribute as well. There's not a set schedule for that, at least that I've seen in the past. They have a schedule, but folks are going to come up and present their project. I am excited for workshop registrations as well. So there's one workshop that I got into is actually with Jason Blanchard, who I first saw his talk at DerbyCon, that actually led to wanting to put a little bit more effort into my own blog and podcast. But his workshop is really focused on expanding that idea. So how to put together better content, whether it's how-to guides or blog posts or presentations or anything like that. Really a better way to start to organize, the knowledge and experience I have, highlight the things that I'm learning, and try and give back a bit more to the community. So I'm really excited for that one. Awesome. So again, anyone that wants to check that out, Wild West Hackin, no G, HICKIN, fest.com, and certainly show notes will include a link there. The second thing I wanted to talk about actually has to do with a recent event I went to. I was able to attend the IBM Cyber Range in a multi-client event. If folks haven't heard of this, so IBM has a few of these locations, and then they actually have a mobile version and a big tractor trailer that they can bring the event to you. I should say, I'm not a client of IBM. We actually had a mutual connection that got us to attend the event. But it's a facilitated tabletop incident, and what was really cool, so the range itself is set up kind of like a SOC, right? So there's rows of computers kind of in a tiered setup with a bunch of screens up at the front and the sides of the room. And at least for the day that I attended, the other organizations were actually a few folks from major city fire departments, some major hospitals, and some other medical research-based universities. And what our experience was like, so in the morning, you go in and they're giving you a bit of presentation around, what does incident response, best practice look like, and what should our response look like today. And then they get pretty much right into the tabletop exercise. And it was nice because, there are certain injects throughout the day, but they've got a second facilitator that's acting almost like, an on-staff engineer or anything like that, where you can actually ask some questions and get answers about the response activities that you're taking. I don't want to give too much of the scenario away, because I'm sure in the multi-client experiences like that, they have a few standard items. but what was really interesting was um, so much of the incident was focused on managing um, industrial control systems and power grids and things like city streetlights and traffic patterns and things I've just never had to consider before as part of incident response. Nothing I've looked at has been something of that scale where we're looking at a whole region instead of an organization and related parties from there. So that was really eye-opening just to see how incident response works at such a large scale. I thought it was a really good experience. The one thing that I would put out that I think when I've talked with a few folks that are a little worried about is that it's really just a giant sales pitch. And it wasn't. I mean, they're using IBM tools as part of the response, but not in any sort of pushy fashion. And there really wasn't, a sales pitch side to it like I had expected. It really was, or at least it felt like the whole program was designed as a knowledge sharing thing. Certainly, if you're interested in tools when you see that, you can, I'm sure they'd have folks that'd be happy to speak with you about it. But the experience really didn't feel like a sales experience at all. It really felt like it was focused on learning. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was they also include some PR type training or testing where you'd want to have either a public relations person or even an executive person join your group that goes to the event, because they have a fake little newsroom where you can get bombarded by questions from news anchors, and that gets put together into the overall scenario. So really cool overall experience. All right. The next thing to talk about here is actually what I've been working on, SANS related, for about a month now. Netwars continuous. So I'm actually in between full classes for my SANS program, but I had a 2-month break between the end of my last class and SANS Orlando. So I was able to squeeze this in. I think it's a 1-credit project, we can call it. But so if you haven't heard of SANS Netwars, it's a capture the flag event. They have a lot of Netwars at the in-person SANS events. What's nice is Netwars Continuous is kind of like the on-demand version of classes. So it's an online CTF, but you get access for, I think it's 4 months for the standard, like if you just went out and purchased it yourself. And so far, it's been really cool. The way for the master's program grading is set up is you have to unlock, you have to at least get to level 3. There's 5 levels, and you have to accumulate a certain number of points. Each of the questions has different point values, and you start losing points for wrong answers. So each question, I think you get one free submission to get wrong, and then after that you start losing points. So you really have to actually understand, what the question is asking and what you're submitting. What is nice is I think there's up to 3 hints for each question, and they start to give more and more information with each hint. I had a bit of a rage quit moment, which of course came back to I think a typo on my part. but going through, I really wanted to see how far I could get without using any hints, really as a test of, my knowledge and understanding. And so I have started using hints. At this point, I want to get as far as I can in the exercise. But yeah, for a while, I was getting pretty frustrated, just trying to, get the syntax of different things correct, and trying to remember, back to some other classes I've taken, and just, things I know from work. Making sure, the different flags you're using. So there's, only a set number of tools built into the virtual machine that you're using. So making sure that you're using those tools properly and to their full ability is probably the biggest recommendation I could put out there. I've got about a month left for it, so I'm really excited to see what the rest of level 4 and level 5 contains. The description of the different topics covered can be found at sans.org/netwars/continuous. I'll link to that in the show notes as well. But definitely something, if you've participated in a CTF event, at different conferences, and it might be something, you're interested in. SANS does have, an offensive one, which is the Netwars Continuous, and they also have a defensive one and a digital forensics and incident response one. The defense, I got a little bit of exposure to through, I think it was the GCIA class, touched on that. But the DFIR continuous, I haven't had any exposure to, but based on the two that I've seen, I'm sure the quality will be there. The third thing I wanted to talk about today is actually a recent tool release from Netflix. I'll link to, they have a really good write-up on Medium describing the tool, and then within that post they link to the GitHub page to actually find it. But the tool is called Dispatch, and what's cool about this, so Netflix released it, it's really an overall orchestration framework for managing incident response. But the reason why I thought this was really cool and worth mentioning is they didn't want to recreate the wheel. What they're looking at here is really just tying together the different tools they have in place, and it's built in such a way that you can integrate with other tools if what they initially released here doesn't work for you, but integrate with tools that you already have in place and just centralize that knowledge. So if you're using Slack or Google Docs or G Suite or PagerDuty, all of that can be in one place. And then, you can have, when an incident is entered into the dispatch, that main landing page, it'll post something in Slack and start to pull the right folks into that channel for discussing the incident. It'll make a folder in Google Drive for you, or it'll blast out an email notification over G Suite, or, push out a notification over PagerDuty. It starts to automate a lot of the what they call, lower value tasks, things that are needed but are going to take up some of that cognitive load of your incident responders, where you really can just start to automate that and let the responders focus on actually fixing the issue. So definitely a really cool tool worth taking a look at. It's built with Python, Vue.js, and a Postgres database. And what's nice is they also have this available in a Docker container as well. So even just testing it out, you can spin that up pretty quickly to take a look at it. All right. So the last thing I wanted to highlight here is actually a GitHub repo that I found recently. This actually came from, I think it was the Sandstormcast on February 21st. I think Johannes talked about this. But Rob Vanderbrink has a post about his PowerShell script, whodat. And the point of it is enumerating who owns a workstation, for incident response purposes. And the point was, hey, if you've got, hundreds or thousands of workstations in your environment and you're trying to figure out, the best point of contact if you're starting to respond to a box, and you want to figure out who's on the other side of the keyboard. Maybe you want them just to take their hands off the keyboard, step back for a minute so you can start to do an image dump or memory collection, or whatever you need them to do. How can you quickly identify who's at that machine? And what's nice is the script actually puts together a table, right? So it'll leverage the information in Active Directory, get a list of the workstations, identify who's logged in there, and then list the name, email, and phone number for that person, so you can really quickly identify who's at each machine. So I was reading that write-up, so that's pretty cool. I want to take a look at the PowerShell script for that, which links back to Rob's GitHub repository for critical controls, and that's actually what I'm going to link to. I can link to both the initial write-up and this one, but what's interesting is he's got a repository with a ton of PowerShell scripts and blog posts categorized by each critical security control, and identifying really where these tools can help implement the critical security controls. And based on the README, right, it's really focused on giving you some free tools, or as free as possible. There may be different APIs you can leverage, but for the most part, these scripts are focusing on looking at an Active Directory environment and being able to automate some of those control requirements. So definitely worth taking a look at if the critical controls are something your organization is implementing or considering implementing. That's all I really have for today. Again, show notes can be found at seangoodwin.blog/STS007. And until next time, I'll talk to you later.